Okay, we're starting this video with 26D. So D and E both have square roots in them. So what we want to do first is we want to isolate the square roots. So that means we want to get this by itself. Now I can move the x or I can move the square root. I'm noticing this is negative. So if I moved the square root to the other side, it would be positive. So I kind of like that because I get rid of that negative. So now it's isolated. So now I am going to square both sides. Okay, so on the left I get x squared. On the right, the square root and the square cancel, and I get 8x minus 12. Now my square root's gone. This is quadratic, so I'm going to put everything on one side. So I'm moving the 8x and the 12 over, and when I change sides, I change signs. All right, I can factor this. This looks like x minus 6, x minus 2. And I set each factor equal to 0. Now when you get done, you get a 6 and a 2, and you may be really tempted to just box it and go on. But remember, we did square both sides, and anytime we square both sides of the equation, we must check our solutions. Okay, they may both work, they may neither work. We don't know until we check them. All right, so let's start with the x equals 6. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my original equation, and I am going to go right back to here, and everywhere I have an x, I'm going to put a 6. So this becomes 6 minus the square root of 8 times 6 minus 12, and I want to see if that equals 0. So underneath my square root, I get 48 minus 12, which is 36. And then the square root of 36 is just 6. So I get 0 equals 0. So that works. So I get to keep this answer. So now let's check the other one. Let's check x equals 2. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to go back up to my original. Everywhere I have an x, I'm going to put a 2. So 2 minus 8 times 2 minus 12, all equal to 0. So I get 2 minus, that'll be 16 minus 12 will give me 4. Square root of 4 is 2. And I get 0 equals 0. So this time they both worked. I get to keep them both. So my answers will be 2 and 6. All right, so we want to do the same thing on E. We want to isolate this square root. What I don't want to do is I don't want to try to square it here. So what a lot of people do is they say, oh, well, that's just x squared minus 4 plus x. I just square this and I just square this. That actually doesn't work at all. If you do it this way, you have to FOIL it. And as you can imagine, foiling that would make a big mess. So this is why we always want to start by isolating the square root. Now I'm not a big fan of this negative sign, so I'm going to start by putting that square root on the other side. So that would be x equals a positive 4 plus x minus 2. So when I moved it, I changed that negative to a positive. But I don't particularly want this minus 2 over here, so I'm going to move it to the other side where it becomes x plus 2. So now I've isolated that square root. So once I've done that, I can square both sides. Now don't forget, over here on the left, I do have to FOIL this. This is x plus 2, x plus 2. So that's going to be x squared. 2x and 2x gives me 4x. And then 2 times 2 gives me 4. And then the square root and the square cancel, and I get 4 plus x. All right, so I'm ready. Now I got rid of my square roots. I want to put everything on one side. So let's minus those x's and get those to cancel. And then minus the 4's and get those to cancel. So I get x squared plus 3x. And notice those canceled as well. So I'm just equal to 0. This is nice because it's really easy to factor. All I do is take out an x and set each one equal to 0. So I get x equals 0 and x equals -3. But remember, I have to check these. I did square both sides, so I do have to check. All right, so let's do our check. Let's start with x equals 0. So for this one, I go all the way back to my original, and everywhere I had an x, I'm going to put a 0. So that becomes 0 minus the square root of 4 plus 0 equals -2. So I get 0 minus the square root of 4 equals -2. That's 0 minus 2 equals -2. And that one checks out. All right, so I got to check my other one. X equals -3. So I go back up to my original. Everywhere I have an x, I'm going to put a -3. So that'll be -3 minus the square root of 4 plus -3, all equal to -2. Now if I clean up that square root, I just get a 1 under there. So I end up with -3 minus 1 equals -2. Well, -3 minus 1 equals -4. So those are not equal. So that means that answer gets thrown out, and I just keep my answer of x equals 0. All right, now your last equation is an absolute value. So absolute value equations are different than all the others. But one thing that's the same as the problems I just did is I need to isolate that piece first. Actually, let me take that part off. I just want to isolate the absolute value of x plus 3. So let's move the 5 over. I get 2 times the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 12. And then I divide by 2. So I want to do this first. I want to get this by itself. Now remember that absolute value is, let me redo that, I'm making a mess today. Absolute value is distance from 0 on the number line. So let's think about numbers that have an absolute value of 6. We know that the absolute value of 6 equals 6, but we also know the absolute value of -6 equals 6. So what that tells me is this number right here can come out to be a +6, or it can come out to be a -6, because once I take the absolute value, they'll both become 6. So what's inside there, the x plus 3, can be a +6, or it can be a -6. So I'm just looking at the two numbers that have an absolute value of 6. All right, so I'm going to solve the first one, and I get x equals 3. Solve the second one, and I get x equals -9. Now you can check those, you can plug them back in, and they will both make your equation true. So that would be answers of -9 and +3.